Mad Max started the entire 80s action genre in a lot of ways. It wasn't the first movie to portray a lone wolf hero, in fact that type of character goes all the way back to the 60s Italian western genre. But it was one of the first movies to bring this archetype into the modern world. In addition, the entire leather jacket, boots and aviator wearing style comes from this movie, a style and look that turned out to be so popular it dominated the 80s and is still loved today because of its timeless aesthetic.
In the not-too-distant future, there will only be madmen and the main force patrol.
Most people associate Mad Max with the post-apocalyptic story and landscape, but that was introduced in the second movie. The first one actually takes place in a world that is still intact. What makes it so great is the fact that Max is a lot more relatable than the average action hero. He's young and athletic, but his physique is much more average compared to a Stallone or Schwarzenegger, who are full of steroids and look like unbreakable rocks. They look like what you'd expect an action hero to look like. Max looks like someone you could randomly see on the street or in your local grocery store. He doesn't look or even act like a man ready to hunt down loads of villains while taking his time to engage in shirtless knife fights. Despite that, from the first moment he's introduced, it's clear that he's just as much a badass. He's an adrenaline junkie just like the rest of his friends within the main force patrol. The movie clearly takes place within the last days of society functioning somewhat normal, although you can already see a big rise in lawlessness and chaos. This is what the world looked like before the post-apocalyptic landscape in the sequels. In Mad Max, the main force patrol seems depleted and on its last legs. We're not actually told how many people still serve in it and how strong they are, but based on what we see, it's clear that at least in Max's division, it's heavily underfunded and understaffed. This might be the reason why their chief encourages them to take matters into their own hands and basically inflict vigilante justice whenever they can. It's possible that he sees the insanity going on in society and wants to combat it that way, or he just realizes that things are about to go down hard and that hardcore justice is the only way to stay alive.
Don't believe in heroes anymore. Well, damn them! You and me, Max. We're gonna give her back the hero!
This movie is actually very violent, but not in the same way as Rambo or Commando are. The biker gang terrorizing the area is shown to be without any morals or limits. They are pure degenerates and that's how they behave. In one scene, which honestly was really uncomfortable to watch, it is heavily implied that they not only robbed and beat up a couple, but also engaged in certain forceful acts on both of them. I can already imagine the headlines back in 1979 when Mad Max came out, talking about how this and how the movie is poisoning the minds of young people. But this violence is fitting to the world the movie is portraying. When the main force patrol arrests one of the bikers for this act, we're shown him walking free because of some legalities and because no one cares anymore. It's a gut punch, especially when thinking about the victims that are portrayed in a state of extreme shock, disbelief and mental pain after such a traumatic experience. It also does a perfect job at making us hate these bikers even more, and it reinforces the idea of vigilante justice or rogue cop justice being a good thing, at least within the context of the state the world is in. The atmosphere in Mad Max is very depressing and sad. Society is declining and it feels like no matter what you do, there is no escape from the eventual crash that is coming. Max's behavior is heavily influenced by the current state of the world. He is introduced by being extremely reckless and almost suicidal, character traits that get amped up to an extreme degree in the second half of the movie. It's either that or he's the perfect poker player and he's just an expert in bluffing. He's an adrenaline junkie and car fanatic, which is a theme of this movie and the series in general. Although cars are nowhere near as prominent or important in this movie as they are in the sequels, neither is gasoline. Most of the action between Max and the biker gang doesn't actually happen until the final act of the movie. It builds up slowly over the course of the movie, with Max's best friend and colleague getting killed, as well as his wife and child. This sets him off completely, and it's at this moment he turns into the mad killing machine we all know. When he finally goes after the bikers, he does so in a violent and extreme way, with only vengeance being on his mind. They picked the wrong person to piss off, and now, one by one, they are finding out. The movie doesn't feel dated, and the ideas and topics it portrays and talks about are just as relevant today as they were back in 1979. While it's not as fast-paced as the sequels or reboots, it definitely knows when to pick up the pace and when to focus on character development. Max is not shown to be someone that strives for violence or seeks it out. He engages in it because of his job in the main force patrol and because he happens to be the best officer within his department. But he's not shown to be particularly cruel or even aggressive. In fact, he's actually very calm-natured and quiet for most of the movie, even early on when he chases down a dangerous criminal. This calm nature of him reminds me a lot of The Man with No Name from the Dollars trilogy. There, Clint Eastwood's character doesn't speak much either, and even when he engages in violence, he's never shown to be very aggressive or out of control. More so, in the spaghetti western genre, the main protagonist often has less dialogue than other characters, and the movies are often explained through their visuals more so than the characters or the story. It's similar in Mad Max in the sense that most of the things we see happening happens through visual representation rather than the characters filling us in on what's going on. Max is even shown to leave the force for good after the death of his friend to focus on his family and to prevent him suffering the same fate. Of course, after tragedy occurs, Max decides to come back in full force and madness. He kills all of the bikers one by one without mercy or a chance to surrender. As he chases them down, he also plays with them and their fear as they quickly come to understand that they heavily underestimated him. It's interesting to see how it was actually these bikers that shaped and created his wild character. Before that, he was just a highway cop trying to do what's right, but they created the wild demon hell-bent on revenge that ultimately led to their violent death. Max can't be reasoned with. He can't be bargained with or bribed. His sense of justice has shifted to chaos. He has turned into Mad Max.